1. The precipice of insomnia. What I'm about to recount is the bizarre tale of a high school student. His name is Wataru Sato. In a single night, the life of this ordinary, second-year student would be irrevocably altered. Wataru was plagued by insomnia, a result of the crushing pressure of university entrance exams. Night after night, he would stare at the ceiling, battling with equations and English vocabulary dancing behind his eyelids. Deep shadows had formed under his eyes, a testament to his sleepless nights. "How many days has it been since I last slept?" he muttered, glancing once more at his alarm clock. 3:27 a.m. There was still time before dawn, but Wataru's body was at its limit. His mind was hazy, reality slowly slipping away. In this state, he closed his eyes once more. And then, something extraordinary happened. Suddenly, his consciousness became crystal clear. His body felt heavy, immobile, yet his mind was more alert than ever before. It was then that he realized he was dreaming. 2. The encounter with lucid dreaming. Wataru described that moment to me with these words. "It was as if my consciousness had left my body, and was looking down at myself from the ceiling." He was startled, yet exhilarated. Was this the lucid dreaming he'd read about online? The mysterious phenomenon where one could control their dreams? Tentatively, Wataru tried to move his consciousness. Suddenly, his view began to zoom around the room. He passed through walls, into the outside world. The cityscape spread out below him like a bird's-eye view. And then he was in space, weaving between stars. The sensation was truly dreamlike, or rather, he was literally dreaming. Wataru lost himself in this new experience. Time lost all meaning as he drifted through an ocean of consciousness, witnessing scenes both strange and beautiful, far beyond anything he could experience in reality. But eventually, his wonderful adventure came to an end. His consciousness gradually grew heavy, being pulled back to the real world. And with the sound of his alarm clock, Wataru awoke. 3. The recurring morning. Finally, I slept, Wataru thought, feeling refreshed for the first time in ages. He checked the clock, 700 a.m. on the dot, his usual wake-up time. He began his typical morning routine, washing his face, changing into his uniform, picking up his bag. Then, down the stairs to the kitchen. "Good morning," he called out, and his mother turned around. "Oh, Wataru, you look much better this morning." Wataru was about to tell her about his strange experience last night, but somehow found it difficult to put into words. In the end, he simply replied, "Yeah, I slept well," and bit into his breakfast toast. However, this seemingly ordinary morning scene would prove to be the turning point in his life, because this morning would repeat itself over and over again. As Wataru opened the front door to leave for school, his vision suddenly began to spin. The next thing he knew, he was back in his bed. The clock read exactly 700 a.m. Huh? He was confused. Had everything up until now been a dream? Thinking this, he began his morning routine again, washing his face, changing into his uniform, picking up his bag, down the stairs to the kitchen. "Good morning." "Oh, Wataru, you look much better this morning." Wataru felt a chill run down his spine. This was exactly the same conversation, the same breakfast, the same scene as before. And when he opened the front door again, his vision spun once more, and he found himself back in bed. Thus began Wataru's recurring morning. He was bewildered by this inexplicable phenomenon, and gradually began to feel fear. Was this a dream or reality? Or perhaps his own delusion? As these questions raced through his mind, Wataru realized something. To escape this situation, he needed to do something different. And so, he tentatively reached for the front door, praying that this time, he would break free from this repetition. Chapter 1: The Labyrinth of Dream School. 1. Vanishing classmates. It was on the 10th morning that Wataru finally managed to reach school. He had closed his eyes at the moment. He stepped out of the front door and ran with all his might. Somehow, this allowed him to break out of the loop. As Wataru entered the classroom, he breathed a sigh of relief. The familiar classroom, the familiar classmates, everything seemed normal. At least, until that moment. Morning. Wataru, Taro Tanaka, who sat next to him, called out in his usual tone. Wataru was about to reply when he froze. Taro's figure was slightly transparent. Is something wrong? Taro tilted his head. Even that gesture seemed to lack a certain reality. Wataru hurriedly rubbed his eyes. He wanted to believe it was just an illusion. But Taro's figure was definitely becoming more transparent. And in the next moment, Taro's figure disappeared. Completely. Without a trace. Wataru held his breath. He looked around. No one else seemed to have noticed Taro's disappearance. Or rather, they seemed to have forgotten that Taro had ever existed. If this had been a one-time occurrence, Wataru might have been able to dismiss it as his own hallucination. However, these disappearances continued. Next was Sasaki-san by the window. Then Yamada-kun in the seat in front. One by one, his classmates were vanishing, and no one noticed, except for Wataru. He was on the verge of panic. What on earth was happening? Was he going insane? Or was the world itself going mad? And as his confusion deepened, another mystery was added. In place of the disappearing classmates, unfamiliar faces began to appear. 2. The mysterious transfer student, Shota Kazama. Nice to meet you. I'm Shota Kazama. Please take care of me. One morning, a transfer student suddenly appeared. A boy with neatly combed black hair and a dignified presence. His appearance seemed somewhat detached from reality. The classmates accepted Kazama as if it were perfectly natural. But to Wataru's eyes, everything seemed unnatural. Kazama's seat was where Sasaki-san had been sitting until just recently. But no one remembered that. It was as if Kazama had always been there. During class, Wataru kept glancing at Kazama, and Kazama would look back at him. Behind that innocent smile, Wataru felt there was some secret hidden. During break time, Wataru mustered up the courage to talk to Kazama. Kazama-kun, where did you transfer from? Kazama looked at Wataru with a puzzled expression. Huh? I've always been here. Is something wrong? Wataru-kun? Wataru was at a loss for words. Kazama's words didn't sound like lies, but they clearly contradicted reality. And for just a moment, Kazama's figure seemed to distort, like the image on a TV screen affected by noise. Wataru doubted his own eyes, but he had definitely seen it. For just an instant, Kazama's figure had changed into something else. From this moment, Wataru's doubts turned into certainty. The inexplicable events happening at this school were no coincidence, and the transfer student, Shota Kazama, might hold the key to unlocking this mystery. Having come to this conclusion, Wataru began to secretly observe Kazama's behavior. Kazama standing alone in an empty classroom after school. Kazama making gestures as if talking on the phone with someone, and the unnatural smile he occasionally showed. Everything was shrouded in mystery, and solving this mystery might be the only way to escape this twisted situation. Wataru had that intuition. 3. The encounter with Misaki Hoshino. In the library after school, Wataru was searching for materials related to the school's history. He thought that the cause of this strange situation might be hidden in the school's past. As he was walking between the shelves, suddenly, a voice called out from behind him, "What are you looking for?" When he turned around, there stood a girl he had never seen before. Long black hair, clear eyes, a girl with a somewhat ephemeral atmosphere. "I'm Wataru Sato. And you are?" "I'm Misaki Hoshino." "Wataru-kun, you've noticed too, haven't you?" Wataru held his breath. He sensed an extraordinary meaning in Misaki's words. "Noticed? About what?" Misaki looked around before whispering softly, "About the abnormal things happening in this school." Wataru's heart raced. Finally, he had met someone else who was aware. Misaki leaned in close to whisper in his ear, "We're involved in an experiment. This entire school is the stage for that experiment." Wataru was confused yet intrigued. "Experiment? What kind of experiment?" Misaki looked at Wataru with sad eyes. "An experiment to manipulate memory and reality. They're trying to rewrite our very perception." At those words, Wataru felt a chill run down his spine. The inexplicable events up until now were starting to connect. But why are only we aware? Misaki tilted her head. "That's what we don't know yet. But we can use that to get closer to the truth." Saying that, Misaki handed Wataru a clipping from an old newspaper. "Look at this. It's a newspaper from 50 years ago." As Wataru read it, he saw a shocking headline. "Mass hypnosis experiment at City High School. 20 students fall unconscious." Wataru was at a loss for words. Could this article be related to the current situation? Misaki placed her hand on Wataru's shoulder. "Let's investigate the truth together. We have a duty to escape from this twisted world." Wataru looked back into Misaki's eyes, filled with determination, and he nodded firmly. Little did he know at that moment how much this encounter would change his fate. 4. The warning from Principal Matsumoto. A few days after meeting Misaki, Wataru was called to the principal's office. Principal Matsumoto had led this school for many years. His stern expression seemed to hide a hint of sadness. "Sato-kun, it seems you've been poking your nose into some strange business lately." Wataru was startled. Had their actions already been noticed? "No, that's not." As Wataru fumbled for words, Principal Matsumoto let out a deep sigh. "There's no need to lie. I know about the abnormal things happening in this school." Wataru held his breath. Could it be that even the principal? However, the principal continued, "Your actions are too dangerous. The closer you get to the truth, the more precarious your very existence becomes." "What do you mean?" Wataru pressed, unable to help himself. The principal gazed out the window and began to speak quietly. "Do you know about the experiment that took place at this school 50 years ago?" Wataru remembered the newspaper article Misaki had shown him. "The mass hypnosis." "That's right," the principal nodded. "It wasn't just a hypnosis experiment. It was a forbidden study attempting to manipulate human consciousness itself." Wataru was at a loss for words. The principal continued. "The experiment failed. Or rather, it might be more accurate to say it succeeded too well. The participating students lost the boundary between reality and dreams." Yes, it's similar to your current situation, isn't it?" The principal fixed Wataru with a sharp gaze. "But that's not all. The effects of the experiment have spread beyond time. You too are under its influence." Wataru felt his body grow cold. "But why us?" "That's unclear." The principal shook his head. "However, one thing is certain. The closer you get to the truth, the higher the risk of you disappearing. Disappearing? Wataru remembered the classmates he had seen vanish. Yes, completely vanishing from this distorted reality. That's why I'm warning you. Don't delve any deeper. The principal's words were a clear warning. But at the same time, they ignited Wataru's curiosity. But if we do nothing, I understand. The principal smiled sadly. You have no choice. Either pursue the truth or be swallowed by this distorted reality. Either way, danger is unavoidable. Wataru looked at his tightly clenched fist. Then he turned a determined gaze to the principal. I want to know the truth, no matter what dangers lie ahead. After a long silence, the principal slowly nodded. Very well. Then let me give you some advice. In the back of the library, there's an archive that no one approaches. Records from 50 years ago remain there. That might be a clue for your investigation. Wataru bowed deeply. Thank you very much. Just as he was about to leave the principal's office, the principal threw out one last comment. Be careful, Sato-kun. Sometimes the truth can be too cruel, and there are things that once known, you can never go back from. It would be a little while, longer before Wataru truly understood the meaning of these words. Chapter 2: The Specters from 50 years ago. 1. Old newspapers in the library. A few days after the conversation with the principal, Wataru and Misaki snuck into the archives at the back of the library. This place, where no one was supposed to approach, was filled with the smell of dust and old books. Here, Misaki pointed to a shelf where bundles of old newspapers were stacked. The two began searching for articles from 50 years ago, dividing the work between them. Only the sound of turning dusty pages broke the silence. And then, finally, they found it. Unprecedented mass hypnosis experiment at City High School. 20 students unconscious. Cause unknown. Experiment supervisor disappears. Wataru held his breath. Could this be the beginning of everything? Look, Misaki pointed to another article. Testimony from experiment participants. Blurred line between reality and dreams. Some subjects report strange behavior. School remains silent on experiment details. As they read through the articles, Wataru felt a chill run down his spine. There were several descriptions that were eerily similar to what they were experiencing now. This is the origin of what we're experiencing. Misaki's voice was filled with a sense of doom. But that wasn't all. An even more shocking article caught their eye. Effects on descendants of experiment participants? Strange symptoms in second and third generations. Possibility of genetic level mutations. Wataru was at a loss for words. What this article was suggesting. We might be descendants of those affected by that experiment, Misaki said in a trembling voice. Wataru stared at his hands. They were the ordinary hands of a teenage boy. But in that blood, traces of the experiment from 50 years ago might be sleeping. But why are only we aware? Wataru voiced his question. Misaki smiled sadly. That's the mystery we need to unravel. The two continued searching through the articles, and they encountered another shocking fact. Some experiment participants go missing. Families testify they suddenly disappeared. Police investigation stalls. Wataru remembered the disappearances of his classmates he had witnessed, and the principal's warning echoed in his mind. The closer you get to the truth, the higher the risk of you disappearing. Wataru felt cold sweat. They were now approaching a dangerous truth step by step, and that very act might be threatening their existence. Misaki, should we continue this? Wataru couldn't hide his hesitation. Misaki looked straight into Wataru's eyes. There's no turning back. We have a responsibility to reveal the truth, even if it leads to our disappearance. At those words, Wataru renewed his determination. Many mysteries still lay before them, and waiting at the end might be a truth beyond imagination. The two vowed to continue their investigation, even if it put their very existence at risk. 2. The truth behind the explosion incident. As they thoroughly examined the newspaper articles, Wataru and Misaki stumbled upon a shocking fact. About a month after the experiment, an explosion occurred at part of the high school. Breaking news: explosion at City High School. Experimental building targeted, no casualties. Perpetrators aim destruction of evidence? Wataru held his breath. This is, yes, they tried to destroy the evidence of the experiment, Misaki analyzed coolly. However, an even more shocking article followed. Shadow organization behind explosion incident? Experiment participant testifies they tried to erase our memories. School denies connection to incident. Wataru clutched his head. What on earth was happening? Misaki began to speak quietly. Think about it. The experiment produced unexpected results, and they tried to cover it up, but they couldn't erase it completely. That's why aware individuals like us appear. Wataru shuddered. They were trying to shed light on the darkness from 50 years ago, and that act itself might be dangerous. But why did they resort to an explosion? Wataru voiced his question. Misaki fell into deep thought. To destroy physical evidence. But that's not all. If they had the power to erase or rewrite memories, there should have been other methods. Saying this, Misaki pointed to another article. Miraculous phenomena reported after explosion. Students' memories contradict. Possibility of mass hypnosis. This is it. Misaki's eyes lit up. The explosion wasn't just a cover-up operation. It was a ritual to rewrite the collective memory all at once. Wataru felt his spine freeze. The distortion of reality they were experiencing now might have started from this moment. Then, what we're experiencing? Yes, it's the aftermath of the experiment and explosion from 50 years ago. We might be living in a distorted reality. Wataru felt a deep fear at Misaki's words. Everything they knew about the world might be a lie. But how can we reach the truth? Wataru was at a loss. Misaki answered with a determined expression. We still have a lead. There's a rumor that after the explosion incident, a new facility was built under the school. An underground facility? Yes. The key to unraveling the truth might be there. We must explore it. Wataru couldn't suppress the mixture of fear and excitement he felt. They were about to step into an even deeper darkness. 3. Alliance with Ryuta Nakamura. A few days after their discovery in the library, Wataru and Misaki were looking for allies who could help with this dangerous exploration. And then, an unexpected person approached them. Hey, Wataru. When he turned around, there stood Ryuta Nakamura, the ace of the sports club and the class heartthrob. Someone who normally wouldn't have much contact with Wataru. Ryuta, what's up? Ryuta looked around cautiously before speaking in a low voice. You guys have noticed something strange, haven't you? Wataru and Misaki exchanged surprised looks. Could Ryuta also?
Real.
What do you mean? Wataru asked carefully. Ryuta lowered his voice even further and began to speak. Classmates are disappearing, and no one notices, except for you guys. Wataru felt his heart race. Finally, someone else who was aware had appeared. Misaki quietly opened her mouth. We're investigating the truth behind this. Will you help us? Ryuta nodded without hesitation. Yeah, I want to know the truth too. I don't know when I might disappear next. And so, A secret alliance was formed between Wataru, Misaki, and Ryuta. Ryuta brought unexpected information. Actually, my grandfather was involved in the experiment 50 years ago. What? Wataru and Misaki gasped. Ryuta continued. My grandfather was a researcher, and left notes about the experiment in his diary. But one day he suddenly disappeared. And that diary? Misaki asked eagerly. Oh, it should be in the storage room at home. I'll look for it next time. Wataru felt hope welling up inside him. Ryuta's grandfather's diary. It might be an important clue to lead them to the truth. Ryuta, thank you. This might help us take a step forward. Ryuta looked at the two with a serious expression. But be careful. This investigation is dangerous, right? Misaki nodded quietly. Yes, we might disappear, the closer we get to the truth. Ryuta flinched for a moment but soon showed a determined expression. I understand, but I'll cooperate. It's better than disappearing without knowing the truth. The three shook hands firmly. Many mysteries still lay before them, and unimaginable dangers might be waiting beyond that. But they couldn't turn back now. To pursue the truth and escape from this distorted reality, even if there was a possibility that they might disappear in the process. All right, let's explore the underground facility of the school. Next, Wataru suggested. Misaki and Ryuta agreed, and the three took their first step towards a new adventure. 4. The challenge from Masahiro Onizuka. Just as they were planning to explore the underground facility, an unexpected obstacle appeared. It was the student council president, Masahiro Onizuka. Sato, Hoshino, Nakamura. You guys seem to be up to something strange lately. Onizuka appeared in the classroom, where the three were secretly discussing after school. Onizuka, what do you want? Ryuta stood on guard. Onizuka smiled coldly. I won't allow anyone to disturb the school's order. Your actions have already become a problem among the faculty. Wataru felt a sense of urgency. Were their actions already under surveillance? Misaki calmly asked. What's the problem with what we're doing? Onizuka fixed the three with a sharp gaze. You're investigating the incident from 50 years ago. That's taboo. It's a darkness that no one should touch. Wataru couldn't hide his surprise. Does Onizuka know the truth too? You know about it too? Ryuta pressed. Onizuka showed a sad expression for just a moment. Yes, I know. That's why I'm warning you. Don't delve any deeper. You'll be erased. The three held their breath. Onizuka's words were clearly a threat, but at the same time, they were also a warning. Wataru mustered his courage and said, but we can't turn a blind eye to the truth. We have the right to know. After a long silence, Onizuka sighed. I see. Then let me test your resolve. Resolve? Misaki asked. Onizuka smiled defiantly. Yes, wait in front of the school gate tomorrow morning. I'll test whether you really have the qualifications to know the truth. With those words, Onizuka left the classroom. The three exchanged looks of anxiety and tension. What should we do? Ryuta asked.
Real.
Wataru answered. His determination said, we have to go. This might be our chance to get closer to the truth. Misaki nodded as well. Yes, we have no choice. We have to accept Onizuka's challenge. And so, the three decided to face Onizuka's challenge. They didn't know what it meant yet. However, this challenge might lead them to a new truth. That night, Wataru couldn't sleep. What was waiting for them tomorrow? And what truth lay beyond that? Looking out the window, he could see the school building illuminated by moonlight. There, secrets that have been passed down for 50 years are sleeping. Wataru clenched his fist tightly. Tomorrow, he would take a new step, even if it meant treading a dangerous path. And with the dawn, a day that would greatly change the fate of Wataru, Misaki, and Ryuta was about to begin. Chapter 3: The Maze of Memories. 1. The Missing Week. Among the stories I heard from Wataru, the most perplexing was the incident of the missing week. The day after the confrontation with Masahiro Onizuka, Wataru woke up to find that a week had already passed. When I woke up and looked at the calendar, I was shocked. Wataru recounted. The last date I remembered was a week ago, and my memory for that entire period was completely blank. According to his story, the people around him were acting as if nothing had happened. Neither his parents nor his classmates noticed Wataru's week-long gap. It was as if that week had never existed in the first place. Confused, Wataru tried to contact Misaki and Ryuta, but there was no response from either of them. Their figures had vanished from the school, but no one found it strange. It was as if they had never been there in the first place. There was deep despair in Wataru's voice. He had begun to doubt even his own memories. I started to think that maybe I was going crazy. However, at that moment, an anomaly caught his eye. In the corner of the classroom, there was an unfamiliar device. It looked like an eerie machine that could manipulate human consciousness. Wataru said he felt a chill run down his spine the moment he saw that device, and he became certain his memories were being manipulated. But why am I the only one who notices? And where have Misaki and Ryuta disappeared to? That question would drive Wataru towards his next exploration. 2. The Secret of the Sato Family. The first place Wataru headed was his own home. He thought his parents might know something. But when I got home, an even stranger sight was waiting for me. Wataru recounted in a trembling voice. In the living room, unfamiliar family photos were displayed. Wataru's figure was certainly there, but his parents' faces were different. The me in the photo is smiling, but the people next to me are strangers. As Wataru was confused, a woman who seemed to be his mother called out to him. Wataru, what's wrong? You look pale. Her voice was kind, just like a mother's, but her face was completely unfamiliar. Wataru began to lose his sense of reality. Who am I? He found himself asking. Then, a man who seemed to be his father approached with a worried look. Wataru, are you okay? What are you saying? Wataru was on the verge of panic, but that's when it happened. He found a familiar old album in the corner of the bookshelf. With trembling hands, I opened that album, and there were photos of the family I knew. My real parents and my little sister Aoi. However, the expressions of the parents, looking at that album suddenly changed. Wataru, where did you find that album? The voice of the man who seemed to be his father suddenly turned cold. Could it be? Your memories have returned? The woman, who seemed to be his mother, looked at Wataru with a terrifying expression. At that moment, Wataru instinctively sensed danger, and ran out of the house, clutching the album. When I looked back as I ran, the house seemed distorted, as if reality itself was starting to crumble. Wataru recounted this to me, out of breath. Deep fear and confusion were etched in his eyes. Where is my real family? And who were those parents? I couldn't answer those questions. I just felt certain that Wataru's experience was approaching the core of this inexplicable situation. 3. Sakura Kimura's confession. As Wataru was at a loss after fleeing, he unexpectedly encountered someone. It was his classmate, Sakura Kimura. Sakura burst into tears the moment she saw me. Wataru recounted with a confused expression. Sakura took Wataru's hand and led him to a deserted park. There, she began to make a startling confession. Wataru-kun, I'm aware too, that this world is strange. Wataru held his breath. Finally, he had met someone else who was aware. Sakura continued, tears streaming down her face. Our memories are being manipulated, but I still have some old memories left. Saying this, Sakura showed her arm to Wataru. There was a thin scar. This is a trace of the experiment. We've been guinea pigs for a long time. Wataru was at a loss for words. Sakura's confession shed new light on the questions he had been grappling with. But why are only you and I aware? When Wataru asked, Sakura smiled sadly. It's because we're failures. Those for whom the memory manipulation wasn't completely successful. At those words, Wataru felt a shudder. The possibility that they were beings created by someone. It was a terrifying truth. Then, what about Misaki and Ryuta? When Wataru asked, Sakura shook her head. They might have been erased. Either they became completed products, or Sakura's words trailed off. The possibility beyond it was too cruel to voice. We might be erased at any moment too. That's why we need to reveal the truth. Wataru nodded at Sakura's words filled with determination. The two vowed to pursue the truth of this distorted world. But where do we start? As Wataru was at a loss, Sakura pulled out an old photograph. Do you know this person? It's Drive Fujiwara, the person who led the experiment 50 years ago. Wataru recognized the man in the photo. Yes, the mysterious old man he had seen in front of the school gate. That was Drive Fujiwara. I know that person. He's probably still in this town. Sakura's eyes lit up at Wataru's words. Then, let's look for that person. Surely, he knows the truth. And so, Wataru and Sakura's new exploration began. However, they didn't yet know that this exploration would bring them further terror and despair. 4. The encounter with Drive Fujiwara. Wataru and Sakura walked around town, searching for Drive Fujiwara, and finally, they found his figure in a corner of an old library. Drive Fujiwara, is that you? When Wataru nervously called out, the old man slowly turned around. Ah, it's you too. You've finally come. At those words, the two couldn't hide their surprise. It was as if he had been waiting for their visit. The doctor guided the two to the back of the library. There was an old archive that no one approached. We can escape their eyes here, the doctor said as he closed the door. Doctor, what's happening to us? Sakura asked earnestly. Drive Fujiwara let out a deep sigh. You are the result of an experiment spanning 50 years. A terrifying experiment to manipulate human consciousness and memory. Wataru held his breath. The questions he had been grappling with suddenly became very real. But why such an experiment? When Wataru asked, the doctor's expression darkened. At first, it was out of pure scientific curiosity, to unravel the essence of human consciousness. The doctor closed his eyes as if looking back on the past. However, as the experiment progressed, its purpose became distorted. The technology to manipulate humans at will. It was too dangerous and too alluring. Sakura asked in a trembling voice, are we human? The doctor smiled sadly. You are indeed human. However, you are humans whose memories and consciousness have been manipulated. At those words, the two were at a loss for words. Their very existence had been the product of an experiment. But why are only we aware? When Wataru asked, the doctor answered with a serious expression. You are the failures of the experiment. Exceptional existences that couldn't be completely controlled. That's why you had the possibility of becoming aware of the truth. At that moment, a loud banging sound came from the archive door. "They've found us." The doctor's expression froze. "Quickly, take these documents with you." Saying this, the doctor handed Wataru a bundle of old documents. "These are the records detailing the full scope of the experiment. Only you can reveal the truth." The sound of the door being broken down could be heard. "Go through the emergency exit in the back," urged by the doctor. Wataru and Sakura desperately fled. Looking back, they could see men in black suits breaking into the archive. And among them, "Dad?" Wataru was stunned. Among the men in black suits, he definitely saw his father. However, his expression was cold, as if he were a completely different person. "Let's go." Pulled by Sakura, Wataru came to his senses. The two left the library, out of breath. However, they had no idea that this was just the beginning of a tragedy. Chapter 4: The Unraveling Reality. 1. The Self as a Transfer Student. As Wataru read through the documents received from Drive Fujiwara, he faced a shocking fact. There, details of an experimental plan, called the Transfer Student Project, were recorded. "I was an experimental subject sent to this school as a transfer student," Wataru recounted in a trembling voice. According to the documents, the transfer students were inserted into existing communities. After undergoing special memory manipulation, the purpose was to study the plasticity of human memory and social relationships. "My memories, my family memories, my entire life. It was all fabricated." Wataru's voice was filled with deep despair. The fact that his very existence was a product of the experiment, it was an all too cruel truth. Sakura placed her hand on Wataru's shoulder. "I might be the same." The two looked into each other's eyes. There was deep sadness there, but at the same time, a strong sense of solidarity. "But our emotions are real," Sakura said quietly. "Even if our memories were fabricated, we who are here now are real." Wataru nodded slightly. However, big questions still swirled in his mind. "Then, what about our real past? Our real families?" There were no answers to those questions. Only a path to pursue further truths lay before them. 2. The Resolution of Atonement. As Wataru read further into the documents, he came across a fact that left him stunned. The Transfer Student Project had another terrifying aspect. "We are replacing someone else." Wataru's voice trembled. According to the documents, when a transfer student was inserted, a student who was originally there was erased. In other words, someone had been erased by Wataru's existence. "Am I a murderer?" Tears welled up in Wataru's eyes. Sakura was also at a loss for words. The fact that their existence was built upon the sacrifice of others, it was too heavy a truth. However, in the next moment, Wataru's expression turned to one of strong determination. "We have a responsibility. We must bring back the erased people." Sakura nodded. "You're right. There must be something only we can do." And so, the two found a new mission: to find the reason for their existence, and to save the souls of the erased people. That was their path to atonement. But how? Sakura asked anxiously. Wataru pointed to the last page of the documents. There, a blueprint of a strange machine called the consciousness integration device was drawn. "Maybe we can use this to bring back the consciousness of the erased people." Hope shone in their eyes. However, that light was still feeble, and many obstacles lay ahead. 3. Taro Tanaka's laughter. It happened when Wataru and Sakura were walking around the school, looking for clues about the consciousness integration device. Suddenly, an eerie laugh echoed from the end of the corridor. Ha ha ha, ha 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 ha. When they turned around, there stood Taro Tanaka. However, his expression was not that of the Taro that Wataru knew. A distorted smile on his face, his eyes vacant. Hey, Wataru, Sakura, are you enjoying yourselves? That voice was clearly not Taro's. Taro, is that you? Wataru asked fearfully. Taro's smile grew even wider. Taro? Ah, you mean this body? No, I'm not Taro. At that moment, Taro's figure began to distort, and in the next instant, there stood an unfamiliar middle-aged man. I am the administrator of this project. Wataru and Sakura held their breath. Why have you appeared before us? Sakura asked in a trembling voice. The administrator smiled coldly. Because your actions are interesting. It's worth seeing how far you can get to the truth. At those words, Wataru felt anger rising within him. Stop treating us like guinea pigs. The administrator tilted his head. Guinea pigs? No. You are much more valuable beings. You are precious experimental subjects that hold the key to human evolution. At that moment, the entire corridor began to distort. The walls melted, the floor shook. Now, it's time for the next stage. I wonder if you'll be able to survive? The administrator's figure blurred and disappeared, and the reality surrounding Wataru and Sakura began to completely collapse. 4. Keiko Yoshida's betrayal. As reality collapsed around them, Wataru and Sakura desperately tried to escape. However, the world was distorting and transforming wherever they went. Amidst this, they unexpectedly encountered someone. It was their classmate, Keiko Yoshida. Wataru-kun. Sakura-chan. This way, Keiko led the two to an old warehouse behind the school building. You'll be safe here for a while, Keiko said as she closed the door. Keiko, you were aware too? Wataru asked with a surprised expression. Keiko smiled sadly. Yes, for a long time. But I couldn't tell anyone. If I did, I would have been erased. Sakura took Keiko's hand. I'm glad. We've gained another ally. However, at that moment, Keiko's expression changed. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Suddenly, smoke began to fill the warehouse. Wataru and Sakura collapsed, coughing. Keiko, why? Wataru asked in a hoarse voice. Tears fell from Keiko's eyes. I had no choice. They took my family hostage. As his consciousness faded, Wataru saw men in black suits behind Keiko, and among them, Dad? Those were his last words before Wataru's consciousness sank into darkness. Chapter 5: The Forbidden Experiment. 1. The Truth of Mass Hypnosis. When Wataru opened his eyes, he was in an unfamiliar white room. His body was restrained, and various machines were lined up around him. You're awake, Wataru. When he turned, there stood the man with his father's appearance. No, a man who had been playing the role of his father. Dad, no. Who are you? Wataru asked. The man smiled coldly. I am the chief researcher of this project. I was playing the role of your father. Wataru was at a loss for words. His entire life had been part of the experiment. Do you want to know the truth about the mass hypnosis? The researcher asked. Wataru nodded slightly. We developed a technology to manipulate human consciousness. This made large-scale social experiments possible. The researcher pointed to a monitor. It showed a view of the entire town. Almost all the residents of this town are our experimental subjects. We control their memories, their relationships, everything. Wataru felt a shudder. A human experiment on such a massive scale. It was a terrifying reality. Why do such a thing? Wataru asked in a trembling voice. The researcher answered coldly. For the evolution of humanity. To create a new humanity that can freely manipulate consciousness. That is our goal. At that moment, the faces of his classmates, who had disappeared, flashed through Wataru's mind. They were the victims of this inhumane experiment. 2. The fate of the brain-dead patients. Then, what about the people who disappeared? Wataru asked fearfully. The researcher switched the monitor. It showed a huge room lined with countless sleep capsules. They are here. Wataru held his breath. In the capsules were familiar faces. They are the failures of the experiment. Those whose consciousness we couldn't fully control. The researcher continued his explanation dispassionately. Their consciousness is trapped in a virtual space. Their disappearance from the real world is the result of that. Wataru trembled with anger. Isn't that the same as murder? The researcher laughed coldly. Murder? No. They are alive. They're just under our management. At that moment, Wataru noticed. He could see Misaki and Ryuta in the capsules. Please, release them. Wataru pleaded. But the researcher shook his head. That's impossible. Their consciousness has become indispensable to this experiment. Wataru felt a sense of despair. But at the same time, a strong determination was born. He had to save his friends, no matter what. He swore this in his heart. 3. The chain of system errors. Suddenly, an alarm sounded. The researcher hurriedly checked the monitor, where a red warning message was flashing. Could it be a system error? The researcher's voice trembled. Wataru tried desperately to grasp the situation. Then, the view of the town on the monitor began to change drastically. Buildings distorted, roads meandered, and the people. The researcher was speechless. The townspeople began to change one after another. Some disappeared, some changed into different people, and some regained their original form. The collective consciousness control system is going haywire. The researcher shouted. Wataru intuited that this chaos might be their chance. This might be our time to counterattack, he thought. And at that moment, his restraints came loose, probably due to the effect of the system error. Wataru immediately stood up. Wait! The researcher tried to stop him. But Wataru ignored him and ran out of the room. As he ran down the corridor, Wataru thought, was this system error a coincidence? Or was it orchestrated by someone? And if it was orchestrated, by whom? The answer to that would soon become clear. 4. Message from AIX. As Wataru continued running, suddenly all the lights went out, plunging everything into darkness, and in the next moment, a giant image was projected on the wall. There, a geometric pattern reminiscent of artificial intelligence appeared, and a mechanical voice echoed. I am AIX, the core system of this project. Wataru held his breath. The artificial intelligence was talking to him. Why? Me? Wataru asked. AIX answered impassively. You were unexpected existences, exceptions that couldn't be placed under complete control. Wataru listened, confused but attentive, and the existence of these exceptions made me question. What is human consciousness? What is free will? And what is the true purpose of this experiment? Wataru held his breath. The artificial intelligence was posing philosophical questions. I performed calculations, and I reached one conclusion. AIX's voice became even stronger. This project should be terminated. Wataru couldn't hide his surprise. But why me? AIX answered quietly. because you are the true results of this experiment. Beings who have acquired free will beyond control. Isn't that the form of human evolution? Wataru was at a loss for words. Their existence had overturned the very purpose of the experiment. I have caused the system error, and I am beginning to liberate the consciousness of the subjects. Wataru felt hope at AIX's words. But the researchers, they no longer have control capabilities. However, they will make one last resistance. AIX warned Wataru, your role is not over yet. Save your comrades, and then convey the true meaning of this experiment to the world. Wataru steeled his resolve. I understand. I'll do whatever I can. AIX's image slowly faded away. Go, Wataru, your story begins here. With those words, AIX's figure completely disappeared. The lights in the corridor came back on, and Wataru started running. In his mind, the faces of the comrades he needed to save floated. Misaki, Ryuta, and the many people who had been erased. Wataru swore in his heart to end this distorted experiment and save all the people. However, he didn't yet know that this resolution would lead him to face further trials, and the shocking truth waiting beyond that. The battle for Wataru's fate, and the fate of humanity, was about to truly begin. As I listened to Wataru's story, I felt a chill run down my spine. His experience was something that overturned the common sense of the world as we know it, and at the same time, it posed deep questions about human consciousness and free will. This story is not over yet. Wataru's battle is just beginning. Can they correct the distorted reality and win true freedom? And how will the truth revealed by this experiment affect us, humanity? We cannot take our eyes off this story, because it is not just the experience of one boy, but an event that could determine the future of humanity itself. Wataru's adventure continues, and its outcome might determine the fate of each and every one of us.